Caitlin Clark changed everything. From ticket sales to TV ratings, from locker room culture to league-wide marketing strategies, her arrival in the WNBA was more than just the debut of a hyped rookie. It was a shift in gravitational pull. But for the Indiana Fever, that shift exposed something deeper, a philosophical clash between the old guard and the new era. Stephanie White's tenure as head coach was marked by structure, control, and cautious optimism. Her systems emphasized team balance and veteran leadership. But as the game evolved and Clark proved to be more than ready for the spotlight.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
White's refusal to build around her star became glaring. Rather than empowering Clark to dictate tempo and create spacing, the Fever remained locked in outdated schemes. Rigid sets, over-reliance on secondary scorers, and minimal off-ball action for their most dynamic playmaker. Even when Clark went down, the system failed to adapt. Instead of diversifying the offense or unleashing role players into expanded roles, White's rotations grew tighter and more confusing. Key veterans like Sims and Howard sat for extended stretches, while the team's offensive rhythm fell apart. The result? A devastating collapse in the semifinals, one that now feels like the inevitable outcome of months of systemic misalignment. It wasn't just tactical, it was psychological. There's growing speculation that White feared giving Clark too much freedom would undermine her control. Others argue it was an outdated commitment to egalitarian basketball in a league increasingly defined by superstar gravity. Either way, the consequences were damning. Becky Hammon's Las Vegas Aces provided a brutal contrast. With intentional design and strategic adaptation, Hammond gave her stars room to thrive while trusting her bench to rise to the moment. It was the kind of flexibility and star-focused leadership the Fever sorely lacked. The response was swift. Stephanie White is out. Sandy Brondello is in. And with that change comes a public declaration. The Fever are done playing it safe. Brondello has a reputation for marrying structure with freedom, for designing offenses that both highlight stars and keep defenses guessing. Her success with dynamic guards in the past signals a new identity for Indiana, one that puts Caitlin Clark at the center, not as a piece, but as the engine. The timing couldn't be more urgent. Clark's presence is not just a gift. It's a responsibility, one that demands innovation, boldness, and a commitment to growth. The Fever's failure wasn't just about poor execution. It was about a vision that no longer fit the reality of the WNBA's direction. This coaching change isn't just about next season. It's about redefining the franchise's identity before it falls behind for good. The era of compromise is over. Now it's all in on Clark, or not at all. You could feel it unraveling in real time. The Indiana Fever were in control of a critical semifinal game. And then, like a switch flipped, it all fell apart. Not in a slow burn kind of way, but a spectacular implosion. Missed free throws, sloppy turnovers, a 9-minute field goal drought, and a bench that looked more confused than coached. The collapse wasn't just painful. It was revealing, because this wasn't the first time the Fever had looked disjointed under pressure. But it was the loudest, the highest stakes, the moment that ripped the curtain down and exposed just how brittle things had become under head coach Stephanie White. And in the fallout, questions turned into accusations, and those accusations turned into action. White is out. Sandy Brondello is in. Let's not sugarcoat it. White's downfall didn't come out of nowhere. The warning signs were everywhere this season. From her stubborn adherence to conservative play calling, to her refusal to build the offense around Caitlin Clark, the most influential player in the league, her approach never quite aligned with the modern WNBA. And by the time the playoffs rolled around, her coaching decisions weren't just questionable. They were indefensible. Take the semifinal game. With Clark out, the blueprint should have shifted. Instead, White doubled down. She ran the same schemes that hadn't worked with Clark, let alone without her. Instead of leaning into experienced, high IQ players like Natasha Howard and Odyssey Sims, she benched them during crucial stretches. Instead of trying anything, to spark offense during the fourth quarter drought, she waited. and waited and watched the Aces take full control. And let's talk about Becky Hammon. Because while Indiana was fumbling the bag, Hammon was out there coaching like it was a chess match she'd already solved. Every substitution felt calculated. Every timeout came before the momentum shifted, not after. It wasn't just good coaching. It was elite, playoff-ready strategy, and it highlighted everything Indiana was missing. The frustration wasn't just about losing. It was about the way they lost. This wasn't a team that got beat by a better roster. It was a team that beat itself through hesitation, bad decisions, and a head coach seemingly unwilling or unable to pivot. And when your system starts to look like a cage for your players, people take notice. Which brings us back to Caitlin Clark. Her absence was felt everywhere, but it was how the team responded without her that set off alarm bells. There was no offensive creativity, no defensive grit, no urgency. It's like they were waiting for her return instead of adapting in her absence. And fans didn't just blame the injury. They blamed White for creating a system so rigid, so reliant on outdated philosophy, that it couldn't function without its biggest star. And that's when things started spiraling off the court. The fan discourse turned into full-blown conspiracy. Was Clark being deliberately sidelined? Was White threatened by her popularity? Was there tension between star and coach? And the more people watched, the harder it became to dismiss those theories as just noise. Because what kind of coach doesn't build the offense around the most dynamic player in the league? Instead, White seemed intent on forcing Clark into a pre-existing structure, as if she were just another piece to plug into her system, rather than the focal point around which everything else should orbit. In a league where stars drive success, on the court, at the box office, and on national broadcasts, this was a coaching decision that felt more like sabotage than strategy. And it wasn't just the fans noticing. Analysts, former players, insiders, they all started asking the same thing. Why was Stephanie White refusing to let Caitlin Clark lead this team? Why was she clinging to a playbook that clearly wasn't working? Why was she making decisions that seemed more about control than winning? The answer? It doesn't really matter anymore. Because now she's gone. Sandy Brondello's hiring is a clear signal from the Fever front office. They're not going to waste the Caitlin Clark era. They're done pretending this is just another rebuild. Done acting like Clark is a complementary piece. Done tolerating a coaching style that can't evolve. Brondello brings experience. She brings adaptability. And most importantly, she brings a track record of working with stars, not against them. She's coached Diana Taurasi, Skylar Diggins-Smith, players who don't just demand touches, they demand systems built to amplify what they do best. That's what Indiana has been missing. A coach who understands that in today's WNBA, you don't win by controlling your stars. You win by unleashing them. Let's talk strategy. Under White, the offense stalled in half-court sets. There was little off-ball movement, limited three-point creation, and a tendency to over-rely on scripted plays that broke down under pressure. The entire system was rigid, predictable, easy to scout, easy to stop. Brondello, on the other hand, favors fluid motion offenses, player-led decision-making, adaptability. She's not afraid to change her approach based on personnel. And with Clark as the centerpiece, you can expect a drastically different style. More pace, more pick-and-roll action, more freedom to shoot from range and create mismatches. That alone changes everything. Because when the Fever let Clark be Clark, when they let her break down defenses, extend the floor, and dictate tempo, they become a different team. A dangerous team. And with a coach who actually recognizes that Indiana isn't just hoping to compete. They're planning to win. Of course, none of this fixes what's already broken. The locker room still needs to recover. The trust between the front office, the players, and the fans needs to be rebuilt. Because White didn't just lose a game. She left a cloud of doubt and dysfunction. A team that played hesitant. A fan base that felt betrayed. A star who, at times, looked more like a pawn in someone else's system than the generational talent she is. And now, the entire league is watching. Because what happens in Indiana doesn't just affect one team. It affects everything. Caitlin Clark is the WNBA's biggest asset right now. Her development, her platform, her success, It's all tied to how well the Fever handle this transition. If they fumble again, it's not just a coaching problem. It's a league problem, a business problem, a growth problem. That's why this coaching change matters so much more than your typical post-playoff firing. It's not just about getting better results next season. It's about rewriting the story, reshaping the identity of a team that has, until now, looked directionless despite having the brightest spotlight in women's basketball. The Brondello era starts now, and it starts with clarity. Caitlin Clark is not a role player. She's not a secondary option. She's not just a face on a billboard. She is the franchise. Build around her or get out of the way. Because the Fever's window isn't in 5 years. It's now. And if they don't capitalize on it, with the right coach, the right system, and the right vision, they won't just lose games. They'll lose relevance. And that's the one thing they can't afford. So what's your take? Was Stephanie White trying to protect a broken system? Did the front office wait too long to act? Is Sandy Brondello the fix the Fever so desperately need? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit subscribe for more breakdowns, and stay tuned. Because if the playoffs taught us anything, it's that one decision can change everything. In this league, it's only getting hotter. Stephanie White is out. Sandy Brondello is in. But even with that seismic change in leadership, the aftershocks of the Fever's playoff collapse are still being felt across the WNBA. Because the real story here, it isn't just about one coach losing her job. It's about how she lost it, on a national stage, with the league's biggest star watching from the sidelines, while fans, analysts, and insiders screamed in unison. What is going on with the Indiana Fever? Let's go back to that game, the one that broke the fan base. 9 minutes without a field goal, in a playoff game, with a trip to the finals on the line. You don't need a playbook to know that's unacceptable. But instead of stopping the bleeding, Stephanie White doubled down. She stuck with rotations that weren't working. She left her shot creators on the bench. She clung to the system like it was a life raft, except it wasn't floating. It was dragging the whole team underwater. And that's where the coaching philosophy became the real villain of the story. White's entire approach felt like it was built for a different era. A time before the league revolved around high-volume scorers and star-driven offenses, when role players were the backbone and coaches could win by committee. But today, that model doesn't fly. Not when you've got Caitlin Clark on your roster. Clark isn't just a star. She's the gravitational force pulling the league into its next chapter. And when a coach fails to capitalize on that, when she actively resists it, that's not just bad strategy. That's franchise malpractice. This wasn't just one bad game. This was a pattern. Throughout the season, you could see it. Clark would go stretches without being involved in key possessions. The offense was often slow, structured to the point of predictability. You'd watch a game and think, why isn't this team running through her every single time down the floor? Why is she spacing in the corner while a backup post player forces up a contested turnaround? And the answer always came back to White's philosophy. She wanted system over spotlight, balance over brilliance. But when your brilliance is Caitlin Clark, and you're choosing to balance her out of the game plan, that's not noble, it's negligent. And let's talk about the reaction. The moment the Fever lost that game, the internet erupted. Not just with the usual fire the coach noise, but with detailed breakdowns, clips, stats, and timelines. Fans weren't speculating. They were documenting, like they were building a case, because it felt like something deeper was going on. That's when the words started popping up in forums, tweets, and comment sections. Sabotage. Now, let's be real. There's no confirmed evidence that Stephanie White deliberately tried to limit Clark. But the optics? Not great. The injury recovery timeline was vague. The offense never fully adapted to Clark's presence. And when she wasn't available, the team looked like it had no identity. No plan B. No urgency. People started asking, was White trying to protect her system from Clark? Was she afraid that if the rookie dominated, it would expose the flaws in her coaching? Was this about basketball or about control? Those questions were fair, and they were being asked loudly. But the real indictment came from what didn't happen. White never shifted her strategy, never made meaningful adjustments, never acknowledged what was clear to everyone watching, that her system wasn't just outdated, it was holding the team back. That's where this saga shifts from being about bad decisions to being about institutional inertia. Because the Fever front office didn't act when it was obvious that something was off. They didn't demand change. They let it play out, right up to the moment it crashed on live TV. And now, they're scrambling. Hiring Sandy Brondello is more than just a tactical decision. It's a PR move. It's an admission. They're saying, yes, we see it now. We can't keep doing things the old way. But now comes the pressure. Because Brondello isn't walking into a rebuild. She's walking into a spotlight. Every decision she makes will be judged through the lens of how it affects Caitlin Clark. Every offensive scheme will be compared to White's failures. Every win will be seen as proof that the franchise finally woke up. Every loss, a potential red flag. That's the cost of botching the first chapter of the Clark era. And let's not get it twisted. Clark isn't immune from scrutiny either. She's going to have to perform, stay healthy, continue evolving her game. But it's clear now, if she's going to thrive, she needs a coach who sees her not just as a piece of the system, but as the system itself. Brondello gets that. Or at least, she has to, because the entire league is watching. This situation in Indiana has become a case study, a referendum on how to build around generational talent. Other franchises are looking at this and thinking, don't be the Fever. Don't screw it up. Because Clark isn't just a unicorn on the court, she's a cultural moment. She's the player casual fans tune in to see. She's the one driving merch sales, viewership spikes, and national headlines. When you have a player like that, the goal isn't to integrate them quietly. It's to amplify them relentlessly. And the fact that Indiana wasn't doing that, that's what made the backlash so fierce, so justified. Now, in fairness, White was dealt a tough hand. New superstar, high expectations, injury setbacks, media frenzy. It's not easy. But coaching at this level isn't supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be adaptable. And she wasn't. What's wild is that, statistically, the Fever weren't terrible. They made the playoffs. They pushed a better team. But that's what made the collapse so frustrating. Because it wasn't about talent. It was about decisions. About refusing to evolve. About letting ego, fear, or loyalty to a broken system override common sense. That's why fans weren't calling for patience. They were calling for change. And now they've got it. But here's the catch. A coaching change doesn't fix everything. It doesn't erase the damage. The players still remember what it felt like to be misused. The fans still remember what it felt like to be ignored. And Clark? She's not going to forget how it felt to be treated like a guest in her own offense. Brondello has work to do. She'll have to rebuild trust, not just between player and coach, but between franchise and fan base. She'll have to modernize the playbook, empower the talent, and set a tone that says, we're done playing small. The Fever have already wasted a season figuring this out. They can't afford to waste another. So where does that leave us? At a crossroads. With a franchise that finally admitted its mistakes, a coach who understands the stakes, and a player who is poised to redefine what a WNBA star looks like, if she's given the keys. The path forward is obvious. Build around Clark, design an offense that breathes, and stop clinging to structure for structure's sake. The Fever don't need to be balanced. They need to be dangerous. And now they finally have a shot. The question is, will they take it? Or will this be just another chapter in the long, messy history of franchises who couldn't handle greatness? And just like that, the Indiana Fever are in a full-blown identity crisis recovery arc. One foot in the firestorm of one of the most public coaching failures in recent WNBA memory, and the other stepping cautiously into a new era with Sandy Brondello holding the clipboard. The stakes? Higher than ever. Because this isn't just about X's and O's. It's about trust, about redemption, about proving that this franchise can learn from its mistakes and not just react when the pressure reaches a boiling point. Because let's be honest, Stephanie White didn't get fired for losing. She got fired for refusing to evolve, for turning her back on the one thing that could have saved her job, her system, and her team, Caitlin Clark. And now we're all watching to see if Brondello is bold enough to do what White wouldn't, build around the star. Because here's what makes this whole saga even more frustrating. The template already exists. You don't have to reinvent the wheel when you've got a generational shooter and playmaker on your roster. You run through her. You clear the floor. You let her read the defense and pick it apart. And if she's doubled, guess what? Now your shooters are wide open. But instead of embracing that simple math, White decided to limit Clark's role. Call it old school values. Call it fear of over-reliance. Call it coaching insecurity. Either way, the result was the same: a roster that underperformed, a system that suffocated, and a star player who, at times, looked like she was waiting for permission to be great. And that's the part that still stings. Caitlin Clark didn't come into the league as some unknown prospect needing time to develop. She came in with the hype, the pedigree, and the ability to shift the gravity of any game she stepped into. But instead of handing her the keys, White handed her a leash. Now the leash is off, and Brondello, she better not just hand Clark the keys, she better be building the whole garage around her. Because in a league that thrives on star power, trying to mute your brightest light isn't just a coaching failure. It's a brand disaster. Let's not forget the broader context here. The WNBA is on the verge of a commercial and cultural explosion. TV ratings are climbing. Attendance is up. Sponsorships are pouring in. And at the center of it all, players like Clark. This isn't just basketball anymore. It's business. It's visibility. It's momentum. And Indiana almost squandered theirs. So now the spotlight is on Brondello, and she has no room for hesitation. If she tries to ease into a new system or tiptoe around egos, she'll be repeating White's biggest mistake. This is not the time for caution. It's the time for clarity. You center the offense around Clark. You structure plays that get her into rhythm early. You let her control tempo. You let her shoot. You let her fail and figure it out, because that's how stars grow. You don't babysit a player like Clark. You unleash her. The danger, of course, is overcorrection. That's always the risk when a franchise swings from one extreme to the other. But Brondello's track record suggests she knows how to balance structure with freedom. She did it with Taurasi. She did it with Diggins-Smith. She knows what it looks like to empower stars without turning the team into a one-woman show. And that's the sweet spot Indiana has to find. Because while Clark is the centerpiece, she can't be the whole puzzle. Not if this team wants to be more than just a highlight machine. The pieces around her, Howard, Sims, Boston, they're not scrubs. They're not side characters. They just need to be used correctly. That was the other issue under White, the rotations. The roles. The utter confusion about who was supposed to do what and when. It felt like the roster was being held back by invisible rules. Players subbed out when they were hot. Benched for matchup principles, schemes that force specialists into uncomfortable positions. That stops now. Brondello's job isn't just to make Clark shine. It's to make the team function in a way that supports her and wins games. Because make no mistake, if the Fever miss the playoffs again, or flame out the same way under a new coach, the blame won't fall on Brondello alone. It'll shift to the front office, to ownership, to the entire organization. You only get one grace period with a generational talent. Blow it twice, and people start looking at the exit signs. This is a franchise-defining season, and it's already off to a chaotic start. But chaos isn't always a curse. Sometimes it's the wake-up call, the thing that jolts a team out of autopilot and forces it to finally ask the hard questions. The Fever had to bottom out to realize what they had. And now, there are no excuses left. So what are you hoping to see in this new era? Drop your predictions in the comments. Tell us where you stand on the Clark versus White drama. And don't forget to subscribe. Because if you thought this was messy, wait until next season tips off. The drama's just getting started, and you already know we'll be here for every turnover, trade, and meltdown that follows.